The one thing I thought I would talk about today is the nature of the demonstrations, the rallies that we've seen around, around the world, but we can focus on the States, and I'm Canadian, and there's been a lot of activity in Toronto and Montreal.
Pro-Palestinian protesters briefly disrupted the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade in New York. Police say a group broke through the barriers and tried to glue themselves to the street right in the middle of the parade route.
Harlem is closed in both directions between 87th and 103rd Place.
At one point, police advised shoppers to avoid the area after demonstrators became rowdier.
Well, I just think Free Palestine! Free Palestine!
We are accustomed to seeing, it's a free society. We're accustomed to seeing people voicing their discontent with some issue, political, social, otherwise, and celebrating the right to hear different views is part of our democracy and the democracies here and in Canada. And what we've been seeing for the last few months, well, it started October 8th, really, the day after the massacre, before Israel's response. I don't think these are protests. I don't think these are, what's the intention? A protest will often say, I'm not happy with these actions. And I think that a lot of outsiders might be looking at it that way. My understanding, I'm curious to know how you feel, what you think. My understanding as I see these rallies, these pro-Hamas rallies, in my view, anti-Semitic ones, in my view, and I can guarantee you that if I say that out loud online, that there'll be a barrage of people saying, of course it's not anti-Semitic. Of course we're not anti-Semitic. But to me it is. There was just a day, 2 days ago, I believe it was, a large protest, I said mockingly, in front of Toronto's Mount Sinai Hospital.
Who's ready to shut down all of Toronto?
Why Toronto Mount Sinai Hospital, not the embassy, not, it's not Israel. It's known to be Jewish, and that's why. So what are they targeting? What are they saying? In my view, they are not, they're on the warpath. That's what I see. It's not, you've done the following and I'm upset with you. It's not that. It's, oh, I see what Hamas did. They're trying to destroy Israel. I'm with you. What can I do over here in Canada? What can I do over here in the States to show my support for that? Because this is the campaign. The campaign of Hamas is to destroy Israel, to delegitimize its very existence. And frankly, this is what is being said pretty overtly in these demonstrations, in these rallies. It's, we don't want no two states. We want all of it. And free Palestine. What do you define as Palestine? The media never asks them. Well, take a look at the symbols that they show. They show all of it. And they go online and they tell you what Palestine is. It's the key to that house in your Tel Aviv. It's the key to that house in Haifa. And you'll see lots of, on social media, lots of memes or infographics about the real names of these Jewish cities, and they're all in Arabic names. Forget that this is utter nonsense historically. Their point is this is Arab territory, and they're saying that more and more overtly. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be Arab. They're saying that, and this stuff is warpath. The excitement, I don't see it as being anger. I see it as being excitement that there's this, it's in the air. Wow, we can effect change. We can effect change in the attitude towards Israel here. That's what I see them saying. I see them being galvanized, that there's influence, that people in politics, in Congress, such as Rashida Tlaib, are going to wave their banner, are going to wave the banner of having a free Palestine, which means no Israel. We see that in this, with Susan Sarandon in the arts and other people that are going, yeah, we side with you. How many people at these awards shows, would normally be wearing something that sides with people who have been massacred, one of the most terrible acts of terrorism in our lifetime? And they don't, because they're afraid to be on the wrong side of the mob, is how I would describe it. So if it's a warpath, if I'm right, and I believe I'm right, that the ultimately the Free Palestine movement, this is demonstrating city after city after city and city, across North America. If the goal is to be excited about the prospect of Israel, we can actually see the end of Israel in sight. If the United States conditions its support of Israel for this or that, or ultimately stops, we can get rid of Israel. So Hamas can do its part over there, and the Free Palestine movement can do their part over here in the States, and can do a lot of damage. And we've already seen a lot of that, and we know how it makes us feel. I think that's why many Jews feel extremely threatened. We get it, not even until we get intellectually, but we get it immediately, viscerally. It hits us what these statements are. The movement of Hamas is to destroy Israel, and on October 7th, we saw that was confirmed, and we saw how they mean to do it. And then we see people here in the Free Palestine movement that don't condemn those acts, that kind of say, hey, we won't condemn you. We will legitimize your goals and support you in any way we can over here. And that's a threat to us. Whatever one might think politically of your government in Canada, government in the States, the government in Italy, the government in Israel, is separate from saying you want that place gone. It's a very separate issue. And as Jews, we understand what it is to be stateless. We've had 2,000 years of experience with that. It's not a good experience. Great moments here and there, but I was explaining to my daughter, who's 7 years old, how our people moved from place to place, and how my DNA story, we were looking at DNA, how we have elements from the Levant, from Israel, and it goes through southern Mediterranean world, into Iberian Peninsula, and into North Africa, and that's the history. And then there's also the Ashkenazi side moving to Europe through the Roman Empire. This is the history of our people. Why? Because we were a landless people and had to find shelter in different places. Some place would be safe for us for a while, and then it wouldn't be safe for us after a while. And this is the story of our people. And here we are with the state of Israel. We don't want to go back to that. We want to be like other immigrants in the modern era, where we move and live in places out of choice, out of opportunity, not out of necessity, not out of as simply as refugees and looking for a way to survive, but rather to thrive and give better opportunities to our children, or ideologically move where we want to. So we know to be without a state of Israel, what that is like. And we also know that in order to make that happen, this anti-Zionist movement of Free Palestine and others, but just generally anti-Zionism, whatever one might think ideologically, in practice, if you are actively, you want to decolonize the land of Israel, get rid of it, how is that going to happen? You have 7.5 million, roughly 7 million Jews in Israel. Half the world's Jewish population will have to be ethnically cleansed and or murdered. And that was made clear to us on October 7th, right? we Jews, whether we, again, going back to my point, politically, whatever you stand about with regarding Israel, the implication of wanting to see it gone is that being a stateless people and in de facto endorsing, if not overtly, that massive ethnic cleansing or genocide of half the world's Jewish population. And we can't be for that. So when we see these demonstrations, going back to that point, the rallies that are for that, this is why it gets us viscerally. We get what the messaging is. My positive outlook is based on the fact that because I believe it is what we're seeing in the streets all over North America, because it is a movement that is excited by the idea that they might be turning the page and it might get that Israel's end is in sight now. My sense is that once Israel wins the war, and it is over, whatever way that unfolds, once it is over and Israel is standing and is strong, and there's no question that the goals of October 7th have failed. Once that happens, I believe that the protests, if you'll call them that, these rallies, these demonstrations across North America, that they will die down. Their motive is not, we are upset with. They say that, but I don't think so. It is this war path. And once that war has been won by Israel, they will have lost as well. We can't at this point make our dreams of Israel being decolonized, turned into a free Palestine from river to the sea. We can't make that happen today. And it'll die down. But the people who were part of that, the people who supported that, the institutions that were afraid to condemn those, we live with those. We mustn't forget, when things get calm, God willing, we want things to be calm. We don't want to be threatened as we go to the hospital, as we go into our synagogues, as we go into our Jewish community centers, as we walk into a restaurant, right? Especially if it's a Jewish or overtly, clearly Israeli restaurant. We don't want to feel threatened. So once that calms down, we also don't want to forget the anti-Semitic mask that has been pulled off. The mask covering this anti-Semitism. It's been, and we have to figure out, what are we going to do about that? How do we change the society around us and build up the Jewish people so that we can we can both combat this and also build up an educated and resilient community that is not ignorant of the threats around it. And so that's my sense, and that's partly why I have invited members of Sharaka to join me. I wanted to talk about some of what I've talked about today, because I do believe that they present a path forward that is extremely promising. The idea that, with these Abraham Accords, you had four states making peace with Israel, four countries making peace with Israel. It's a big deal. And you have Saudi Arabia that was in 2019, and I'm probably going to show this clip in my conversation with the members of Sharaka next week. In 2019, there's this prince of Saudi Arabia, not the crown prince, who was on Al Arabiya, an Arab news channel, speaking in English. No, speaking in Arabic. It was in English subtitles, speaking critically of the Palestinian leadership and speaking more warmly towards Israel. This these steps to normalization between Saudi Arabia and Israel are real, and they were happening. And you had these public statements against the Palestinian leadership and more understanding towards Israel. Very promising. What does all that mean? I believe it means the end of the Sunni Arab Israeli war. That there will be a peace between Israel and the Sunni Arab world of the Middle East. That's huge. It is huge. And it changes the temperature completely. And it's very much about, so I'm going into geopolitics and all that, but I think that this promise that you can have an environment, a Middle East, an Israel that is stable, that is stronger, that is at peace with more of its neighbors than it was before. Those are huge, huge, and will have reverberations for us here. My concern, many concerns, one concern about that is that we may see an environment where Israel and the Middle East is safer for Jews than over here. I don't know if I'm right. It's a concern, right? Because we now have seen how hostile institutions can be towards us. That being said, I just watched a really fascinating interview with I think it's called Visegrad 24 on YouTube, and he's interviewing this former retired intelligence officer from American, and he is saying very promising things about the future of Israel. And also, this is the point I really want to make, is that he underlined that Americans overwhelmingly support Israel. He said about 75%. There is a huge discrepancy when you get to a certain age range, the college age, basically, and freshly out of university, or so 18 to 20, 18 to 30, maybe. I don't know the exact range, but that younger demographic, no, that's a problem. And it speaks to ignorance and ideology. I worry about the future of the United States. What are our children, my children, going to? What is the government of the United States going to be like then? Are they going to be like those university students today? Is that tomorrow's leadership or not? The idea, though, going back to what this person said on that interview, 75% of Americans today side with Israel, even though what gets on the social media and on the news are these hot flashpoints. Big demonstration at MoMA, the museum, in New York, and at a subway station here, or in front of on a bridge there. These things are disturbing. They're not nothing, but they're not 75% of the population, and that holds some promise. An audience member talks about people who are ill-informed and who accuse Israel falsely of being colonizers. I still think that the organizers of these rallies, I believe the Free Palestine movement at the top, is on the warpath. I think that's why October 8th happened. October 8th was people hitting the streets before any response in support of. Now, I think that there's a large group of people, our university students and people like you just described, not just kids, plenty of adults who should know better. And I had one of my earlier episodes was about that. And whether it's naive, whether it's just a misunderstanding, whatever it is, it's a position that supports genocide. When they say, I believe Israel shouldn't exist, but I have nothing against Jews. Okay, what is that saying? I believe that I love Jews. Come, sit in my house. I have nothing against Jews. I just think that half the world's Jewish population should be ethnically cleansed. And if they're murdered, I'm going to go you got to understand, like they did on October 7th on the grand scale. That is anti-Semitism. And I'm not saying you're not saying that. I'm just underlining that. And to go back to the idea that, and I'll come to you as well. I see your hand up over here. The people who say, whether I did the research or not, people who hold the belief that Israel, it was built on stolen land, and therefore, its very existence is invalidated. Okay, I dismiss it fully, but let's go with that. So, what's the conclusion? What do you want to do? Oh, you want to ethnically cleanse and murder half the world's Jewish population. This is justice for you? You don't see this as a problem? You're fine with this? Well, why don't you start by other places where so Jews believe that we Jews believe that we have, this is our ancestral home and we have an indigenous connection to this land. We know that no Americans and Canadians have such a claim to that land beyond Native people, and only the descendants of Native Americans, or Native people from the Native nations, and the descendants of African slaves who were brought here by force, only they have a claim to be here, not by choice. Everyone else, so if you're one of those people who goes, I believe you're on stolen land and you should therefore, well, why don't you show us how that's done first?
Nobody gave you the land. Nobody. The Jews are in exile. Why do you have a country? So who's your Messiah? If you have a country, who's your Messiah? You have 3,000 years. Get out of here.
An audience member talks about classic anti-Semitic tropes playing a role in the BDS movement and in other anti-Israel activity. The idea that you start with a belief rather than you let the facts inform you, I think is hugely at play here. And it happens when it comes to racism, to bigotry. You often start with a belief instead of looking at facts. Now, one thing, the reaction to October 7th, there was a lot of not shrugs, but a lot of what I said earlier. Got to understand how they feel. They think you've done that to them. You took their land. I don't agree with that, but I can understand. Could you imagine if after the Holocaust, Jews said, listen, you put us in ovens. We think it's justified if we put you in ovens. You gassed us. I'm not going to go into more details. I've been saying that is ugly to me. To me, the idea that Jews would say after the Holocaust, because you did this to us, we will do that to you and more, or anything like that, would be unacceptable. The world would not tolerate that. They would tell us this is not how justice is done. Because they're right, that's not justice. That's not what eye for an eye, tooth for tooth in Judaism means. It means true justice, not penalizing those who are not guilty, not penalizing the children of, right? And here, on October 7th, every Israeli is considered, was considered, and is considered guilty, or at least fair game. Why else do you remove posters of children and babies from lampposts in Manhattan if you don't think that they deserve it? Right? And the idea, so going back to that point, the world would not have tolerated Jews acting that way to Germans or to anyone else who committed a pogrom against us in the Arab world or in the European Christian world. Another point, we live in a time where we're very aware of, or it's being discussed about racism towards African Americans or Black people, and that there's that it's built into the system. The idea that because of 300 to 400 years of slavery and other forms of oppression of Black people who were brought here as slaves from Africa has had an impact on how racist systems or people might be over here, is more and more accepted in America. And if you believe that to be true, there are all kinds of things to be discussed. I don't want to get into that whole discussion. But if you believe that that period of time cumulatively has had any effect at all on society today, then why don't you think that 2,000 years of anti-Semitism in Europe and 1,500 years in the Muslim world has not had an effect on society? Why do you not think that? 300 to 400 years has had an effect on society in a deep way, but 2,000 years has not? It's untrue. They're in the systems. We see it in literature with Christ figures. You know, the idea that even I'm thinking about this because the early anti-Semitism in Europe was also connected to the church. And I was thinking about how in movies today, in books today, there are Christ figures out there. Even if you're not religious, the iconography, the symbolism is part of culture today, right? Someone writing today who's comes up with a figure like that is not necessarily doing so because he's a religious Christian and wants to emphasize the teachings of Christ. I think that's not at all. It's part of the culture. And how do you not also have all those years inside you? And the person individually sitting across from you who is, who would say, of course I'm not anti-Semitic, because they would believe that because they have no issue with you as a person, with you sitting next to them. That's not what, and they're not understanding these other points, and they don't understand that negating your indigenous connection to Israel and that land is anti-Semitism. And beyond that, and this is, I think, key, when a person says, I accept you as a Jew and not as a Jew who has this homeland and an indigenous connection and right to it, you're redefining Judaism. The outside person is telling you who is, not just who's a good Jew, who is a Jew. No one should be able to say that except for Jews, right? And there are Jews who are not on the same page. Okay. Those people are not shouldn't dictate to the vast majority what is and what isn't Judaism. So I think that there's great, there's a lot. You said there's a lot of factors, and you're right. But this idea of anti-Semitism being in the air over, culturally having an impact on society is a factor, a huge factor, and I think contributes to that belief system about where the Jew belongs and doesn't belong, and what's acceptable for what behavior a Jew can have and shouldn't have. And I mentioned how Jews think. I think that some of this is also internalized by some people. If you are, like most of us, a Jew who has had no experience of living in an indigenous homeland, because that's the history of our people, we have moved from society to society to society for 2,000 years. Our experience here is no different, except that it is a better society than others have been. But we moved from one place to another, to another, to another, to another, under the protection of a greater society. Here we have the ability to be part of that society in more ways than we ever had in the past. I don't want to belittle that, but it is a different experience. There's a great speech that was written by a Italian artist. I think his first name is Herbert Pagani, Pagani. I don't remember if I have the first name correct, but I think it's Herbert Pagani. And he gives this whole recitation about being a leftist Jew who is encountering anti-Semitism, where the outside world is telling him and us, telling him where the Jew belongs in society, and at the end, jump to the end there, he concludes by saying, it's not I am because I think, therefore I am. Descartes had it wrong. He says, it's not I think, therefore I am. I defend myself, therefore I am. What's he saying? He is saying that we live, that the ability to take up arms, and I'm not saying we do that, we should do that, but the ability to take up arms and be this independent state, this people that just like any other people, the French, the Italians, the Poles, the Russians, the Ethiopians, whoever else, you have your own land, you live, you thrive in it, and you can protect your own land. You have the ability to do that. You're not dependent upon others for your own security and safety. It's in your own hands. This experience for the Jew is very, very new, historically. And it's hard for us to wrap our minds around it. Much easier for an Israeli, much harder for us. And almost impossible for the non-Jew, because they've seen us for 2,000 years also in that role. Look, what I said, by the way, is not that it's going to be given to us, this better future. It's dependent on Israel winning. It's dependent on us in North America taking steps to insist on our place in our society, to insist that our leaders uphold the principles that these nations were built on regarding democracy and open societies that tolerate, and not just tolerate, but fully integrate all peoples who follow the laws of the land. I see in the chat, I'm not sure if I missed more, where people are getting information or learn history. And the answer that's Marnie gave us from Instagram and TikTok. Yep, I don't have much more to add to that. But look, actually I do. Where do people get their information? We live in this, in this era where it's in sound bites, and that was mentioned a moment ago. It's also very enforced by media, terribly so. Ilan Levy, that wonderful spokesman from Israel, was on, I don't want to get it wrong, he did some interview recently, I think it's for the New York Times, and he was asked some questions. He gave a very good answer, and then he pointed out after on Twitter that some of his answer was cut. When I think the question was, how can we corroborate your claims about the tunnels, or some other thing about how the UN or UNRWA or something? How can we corroborate your claims? The idea is that they don't, we can't corroborate what you're saying. And Ilan Levy said, we took journalists to this place to see for themselves, including your institution, your media outlet, and they cut that part out. At least he can publicize that, but he doesn't have the forum that New York Times has, the audience, right? So I do think that these larger, where they get their news, and I had Honest Reporting, an individual from Honest Reporting on a few weeks ago, about a month ago, I think, and his job, he's dealing with that all the time, where the media in general is not getting it right. And I don't, they jumped to the gun when the story was that Israel had flattened a hospital and killed 500 people. Jumped to the news, and it proves to be incorrect on all fronts. It wasn't Israel. It wasn't 500, and the place wasn't flattened. I mean, the damage is done. So where you get your news is, it's hard to find news if you're just on the periphery, and you're just sort of taking in news as it comes. What chance do we have? Marnie was saying earlier about moving to Israel. one episode I had not long ago with Nefesh B'Nefesh, an organization that deals with facilitating aliyah to Israel, with immigration to Israel. We're seeing increases in aliyah to Israel. We're seeing an increase in inquiries, and you're seeing it probably more from places like France than you are from the States. Why in a time of war? Why during this time? Yeah, it's interesting. By the way, listen to that episode. He said something that was fascinating to me, because he said that when they poll people, he expected that the motivation would be, the big motivation for moving would be anti-Semitism, and it wasn't. I suspect he's speaking more about North American Jews, but I suspect that if you were to ask French Jews, it'd be a different statistic. Now, so addressing the idea of like moving to Israel, and why go there when it seems on the outside that it's dangerous there. And I think it goes to what I said about Pagani, that artist, the idea that you're in your own home, you're with others who are in the same boat, who are willing to protect our space, right? We're sending our kids to universities, and we don't feel that their spaces are being protected. You go to that. There was a demonstration. There's a viral video out there right now, just a few days ago, about a Jew in Scotland wearing a Magen David.
Yeah. You're not doing anything wrong, okay? You're not doing anything illegal. Is that if people will see your star, which I appreciate that you feel comfortable with, they will just get very, very angry because there's a large group. There's over 1,000 people. I'm guessing there will be a lot of them walking around the city later on. Just bear that in mind.
I will.
From your own point of view, from your own safety.
Yeah, thank you.
Bear that in mind, that not to engage in them, because it ultimately might be you, one person. I don't know if you're with anybody else. Surrounded by a group of people, and it's not a nice situation to
I
be
appreciate
in.
that, yeah.
Okay, please look after yourself.
Okay, will do. Thank you very much.
So instead of protecting the Jew, it's the opposite. It's hide. So that's how we. So the idea, the attraction for some people for moving to Israel is, look, I don't have to hide there. I can be with my own and live my days proud as a Jew. Yes, there are dangers, but I weigh what is more important to me. So many people have said, wow, the Free Palestine movement is not going to win any friends by doing this. They shut down the airport, the access to to LAX and to other airports a few months ago. They're disrupting so many things. What are they thinking? No one's going to like them. And I say, no, you're not understanding what they're going for. They're not trying to win hearts and minds. They already have hearts and minds from many, many people. They're not doing those for that reason. They're doing it, in my view, and it seems to be clear to me, if they're disrupting so much and all over the place, the reason it's intentional, and the reason is to make leaders of institutions, municipalities, governments, to make the calculation and go, oh, it is cheaper for me, this leader, to abandon Israel and the Jew than to deal with a level of chaos and disruption in my local community or in my, for my voters or what have you. It is cheaper. It is easier. And that's what we saw with the policeman. I mean, what is he going to do, right? I don't know how many policemen there were, but not enough to confront the crowd and deal with this. It is cheaper to abandon the Jew.
An audience member talks about how an active and motivated minority can have influence over a silent majority.
100%. I agree with you on that. What business does local municipality have to call for a ceasefire in this conflict that has nothing to do with them and beyond? But yes, I think that the activists in the Free Palestine movement, who are just the way that I just described, are out to make that to effect change at that level, the way I said a moment ago, and also just get their way. It doesn't matter what you think. If I get my way, I have succeeded, and it doesn't. The other stuff doesn't matter. I saw this in the early '90s in Montreal. I was two brief stories. I was in McGill in the late '80s, early '90s, and the main forum for debate on the Intifada and the Israel-Palestinian conflict was the letter writing forum of the McGill Daily. And I remember the McGill Daily was extremely pro-Palestinian and anti-Israel. And I remember writing something that a letter that was very that was unfavorable towards Arafat and the leader of the Palestinian of the movement on campus. The next night, a rock was thrown through our window at our house. No proof, but I stopped writing. I stopped writing letters because there's a real threat to our lives, to my life, to my family's life. What proof do I have? That was the understanding that I got, and I stopped, and there were no rocks thrown after that. The other story is down the street from McGill is this university called Concordia, and there was a politician named Benjamin Netanyahu who came to speak there one day, and there was a riot that erupted, and they went. It was violent. I remember the rabbi of my synagogue going with his wife, and his wife was punched in the breast as she was trying to enter the university for this presentation by Netanyahu. And anyone listening to this who hates Israel and hates Netanyahu would go, yeah, but it's Netanyahu. Yeah, but it didn't matter. It's not justified. You don't, what is this public, what is this society about? We're supposed to allow freedom. We're about freedom of speech. And this place couldn't support freedom of speech. The university couldn't handle the mob. The event was canceled, I believe, and they never had such an event again. You get your way, and it doesn't matter who's right and who's wrong. It doesn't matter that they were wrong. They were wrong to do that, but they calculated it is cheaper for us to not do this and not inflame these people who will inflame the building and cause all kinds of havoc. And they got their way. So how do you win that? How do you beat that? I don't have an answer, except that we have to try. And there are those. I think Barry Weiss, and I've mentioned this a few times, not today, but on other occasions. Barry Weiss is of the belief on a number of things where if you can't beat the system, you create a new system, you create a new institution. And that was the way it was for Jews in many times in our history. We built Jewish hospitals because we're not allowed in that hospital. You build a Jewish golf course and country club because you're not allowed on that one. I think you can do both, but you try that and you demand change from organizations that you want to be a part of. But it's an uphill climb. It's not easy. I do think it'll calm down, but I think Israel will be in a better place before Jews in America are. That's what I worry. Anyhow, on that happy note, thank you for joining me.